In the last video, we talked about three different overall types of style sheets. There's the browser, the default style sheet, the author style sheet, and the user style sheet. You create author style sheets. You are the author of a style sheet for a website. And in saying that, then we can reference the reading from this week, and he talks about the linked style sheet, the embedded style sheet, and the inline style sheet. So we need to know where those things show up in your document. Well, you have an inline style sheet, and that shows up right here in the HTML tag. Okay, so it's right there. So style equals font size of 10 pixels. That is an inline style sheet, and it will win out over everything else. And we don't do those in class unless we're testing something, we're stuck on something, and then we get rid of it. Okay. And then you have embedded style sheets, or, well, yeah, embedded style sheets is how he refers to them. And they show up in the head of the document. So you'll know you have an embedded style sheet when you see something like this. And then we can, inside there, we can put in just like a normal style. There, okay. And this embedded style sheet will override your external style sheet. We don't want to use embedded style sheets, but they occur in the head of the document. Another way to create an embedded style sheet is if you just do new rule, and we'll just say we're going to do a tag, and we'll just say body because we just did it. So let's see, how could you do this? Hold on. How could you do this without hand coding it? Very easily. That's the answer. And so you've got to watch out when you are creating styles in this class. You want to, so in this case we're doing an HTML tag or element, and instead of saying main CSS, and this is where you'll get in trouble if you're not looking for this, if it says this document only, look, immediately you get the style sheet, or this inline, or not inline style, this embedded style that's trying to happen right here in your document. And that is the kind of thing that you don't want. Oh, another way you can tell here is you see this little style thing over here. That should not be there. That means that you have an embedded style sheet, and we don't want that in this class. We only want to see a style sheet file, one style sheet file, and we should be able to see right here we have one style sheet file, and we should just see this right here, which is your linked style sheet, or as I like to call it, your external style sheet. So your external style sheet, it shows up, it is a separate file, and the link to it is within the head of the document, but it is a separate file. That's where it is. That's where its code is. It is in a separate file, versus the embedded. You see all of the code for the embedded right here in the head of the document, and the inline is right here on the tag, the actual element. It's within the element. So remember, the only thing that you're supposed to use in this class is an external style sheet. And the reason for that is if I have an external style sheet, I can link it to every single document in my site, and it's all referencing the same thing. So every single document is consistent. Everybody has the same background color. Everybody has the same header fonts and colors. Whereas if I do embedded, I have to do styles on an individual basis, and if you have 10, 20, 30 pages, that gets really hard to make consistent. And there are some exceptions to the rule, but most of the time you do not use the inline or the embedded style sheet. Okay? And the other thing you got to remember, and we talked about it before, is that you've got those three kinds of style sheets, the big ones. Okay, so you've got you've got three different ways of doing an author style sheet: inline, embedded, external. External being the one that we want, or linked. But then you have that browser style sheet and you have the user style sheet. When you redefine an HTML tag, you are modifying the default or browser style sheet. I am now saying, browser, I know you had a default font, a default background color, and a default font size, or a font color, and a default line height, but I am telling you not to do that anymore. So you are overriding the default styles or the browser style sheet. Okay. Okay, so now that we know what we're looking for, we want to avoid creating embedded styles. Let's create a couple of IDs. Now, I know I've discussed IDs. They've been discussed in at least in lecture 2 a little bit, and they were discussed in your reading. So he talked about IDs and he talked about classes. We really don't do a lot with classes at first because I just want you focusing on one thing that you can do to style your documents besides targeting the HTML tags. Ideally, the way you want to look at this is if you can get the result you want by styling an HTML tag, the body tag, the P tag, if that's going to do all you need it to do, then do that. But now, let's say you have some unique things that have to happen within your document. So maybe this paragraph that has the puppy, maybe it has to have a different background color than everybody else. So we're going to say that it has an ID of intro picture. Now, I wouldn't necessarily put a picture in a paragraph. I know Dreamweaver did that for us, and sometimes Dreamweaver doesn't always do the best things. I might put that in a div. I might put that I might just call it in directly. It could go in a paragraph. This isn't the only way to put it in. It could, there's many ways, and a lot of this is up to your discretion, okay? So in this case, it happens to be in a paragraph, and we want to give this paragraph a unique identifier, okay? Now remember, with IDs, IDs can only show up once on a page. They can be on every single page within the website, but only one time. Okay, so here is how we create a style to target an ID. Let me just refresh my styles panel over here. I've got my cursor on this ID. You can see it's selected down here. And so I click this new CSS rule, and I can see it says pound intro picture. All right, and it's going to occur in main CSS, which is exactly what we want. So I'm going to click OK. And now this, all I'm going to do is give it a different background color. I could do a bunch of stuff in here. We don't know a lot of the settings that you're going to learn as we go through this, but I'm going to give it I'm just going to give this a gray background, or maybe even a black background since the picture is white, and say OK. And now this paragraph, which currently has no width on it or anything, has a black background. Okay, so then we have another situation where we want to target a particular we want to target images that are within hyperlinks, because right now we have this blue border on everything, and the blue border, well, it's only on this image that is a hyperlink. The blue border, you're not going to want that in your design. So how do we get rid of that? Well, we can create a rule that targets images that are within hyperlinks, because this image, we made it a hyperlink in a previous video. So here's the link, and here's, it's an image, and here's the link. And we want to tell the style sheet, hey, anytime you have an image that is within a hyperlink, I don't want a border on it. Okay, so get rid of that default blue border. So here's how we can do it. We can click on the image and we can create a new style. Now this time we're trying to say that we want to target images within hyperlinks, and hyperlinks are part of that anchor tag, and we can see that it's part of the anchor tag when we look here at here. Just let me move this a little bit. Okay, so here is the anchor tag beginning, and you have href, which stands for hyperlink reference. Then here's the image, then here's the anchor tag ending. Okay, so I just broke it all out for you for just a second. We don't want this BR in there, and well, hold on a minute, we'll just crunch everybody together again. But I just want you to see why we're targeting, or how we're targeting things. How do we know what to target? When you're looking at this, how do you figure it out? Well, I've got an IMG tag within an A tag. Okay, so all IMGs within A's, no border. So here we go. I'm clicking on the image, new, and I've got compound this time. Compound means you're targeting more than, you're working with more than one selector. And right now we have, do we agree with this selector? We have an ID. If it has an ID of intro picture and then there's a hyperlink and then there's an image, this rule would apply. That's what this is saying. But we don't want to do that. We want it to be all images on the site that are within a hyperlink. So we don't want this first part here because it's too specific. It would only affect this one div, or sorry, this one paragraph with this ID. So we're going to say less specific. Okay, so let's talk again about compound selectors. When you're looking at the selector, you actually read it from right to left. So let's get more specific for a moment. I am targeting an image within an anchor within something that has an ID of intro picture. At this moment with this rule. That's how you read it, from right to left. These little spaces could be read as within an image, within an anchor, within something with an ID of intro picture. Now, like I said, we want to do this to all images throughout the site, so we don't want that, so I'm going to say less specific. And now it's just all images that are within an anchor. Okay, so we're going to say OK. And now we're going to go somewhere we haven't talked about. So this is a special technique just to get rid of this blue border, and we'll talk more about border very soon in the semester. But right now we're just going to hit one thing, and that is we want same for all. We want none and 0 in this instance. Now the blue border is gone. And there's something I want to point out to you. The higher up, when you have something that's really global, like it affects everything, you want it to affect everything throughout the site, it's easier to find those things when they're way up in your style sheet. So if you've created something, you're like, oh, I was supposed to create that for everything on the site. Well, just go ahead in your style sheet over here, hold this and bring it up, click and drag. And there you go. So what affects the body, and then we've got all images that are in hyperlinks, and then we have this really specific thing. It's just anything that's got an ID of intro picture. So usually the more global things are going to stay at the top of your style sheet. Okay, and now we're going to create one more rule before we end this video, and it is, I'm just going to preview this in browser. And hold on a moment. Let me just get my browser over here. So this is what we've created so far. Now we don't know how to make widths yet or anything like that, so everything is going to be kind of boring until we get just a little further in the semester. But now we have our image, it's a hyperlink, and there's no blue border around it. This paragraph just automatically is going to stretch all the way across the page until we apply widths to some stuff. So we've got a black background as wide as the browser. And then we've got this text over here. Okay, so again, to preview in a browser, you save all, file, save all, which we've done, and then you go to this little globe and you preview in Firefox or whatever you're working in. So the last rule that we're going to create with this particular in this particular video is to set some universal settings. So I've been playing around with some stuff in this video, and I didn't really start off the way that you really should, which is to wipe out the default margin and padding. And we haven't learned about margin and padding yet, but there are settings that control some of the spacing in here. And we want to wipe out that default stuff to start out with, because the browser applies margin and padding to all sorts of things, and you're going to be fighting all sorts of crazy things if you don't do this one step. So we're going to create this rule, and then we're going to move it up to the very top of our style sheet, because that is the very first thing you should do. Instead of all this other stuff, when you start out your project, you do this universal selector first. So here we go. We got a new style sheet, or sorry, new CSS rule, not new style sheet, new CSS rule. And we have choices here: class, ID, tag, or compound. And this thing that we're about to do, it's just best to leave it at compound, because the other stuff you'll get an error. And what you want to do is just remove everything that it might have in there for you and press your asterisk. So that's on my keyboard, it's Shift and then the number 8, which gives us a star. Now again, check to make sure it's going in the style sheet, and then we're going to click OK. And here's what we're going to do, and we will very soon learn about margin and padding. We're going to talk a little bit about it in this lecture, but we'll get more into it very soon. We're going to go to Box, and we're going to say we're going to leave Same for All on and have a padding of 0 and a margin of 0. Click Apply, say OK, and now look what happened. Everybody's super tight. Okay, now before we get hung up on that, if you did forget to do it and suddenly you remember, you want to move this star way up to the top. So it should be the first thing. When I look at the style sheet, that's the first thing I should see. Now there are other people out there that will go much farther than this to reset their style sheet. There's a lot more you can zero out, but this is where this is the basic, and it's usually what I use, and it works out pretty well. Okay. And so that is it for this video, and we'll continue with a couple more things in the next video.